May 11, 1945. 5:47 a.m. The Philippine island of Luzon. The dawn has not yet broken. The jungle of Tayabas province is a world of gray shadows and suffocating humidity. Here, on the edge of the Pacific War, the line between life and death is measured in inches and seconds. In a shallow foxhole near Dingalan Bay, Private First Class John R. McKinney is asleep. He is 24 years old. He stands 5 feet, 7 inches tall and weighs a mere 130 pounds. To the casual observer, he looks like a boy, a quiet, unassuming farmhand from the pine forests of Screven County, Georgia. But John McKinney is not a boy. He is a hunter. A man who grew up stalking game in the deep woods, taught by a father who believed that sights were for amateurs and that instinct was the only thing that mattered. In this pre-dawn darkness, McKinney is about to be tested in a way that defies belief. He wakes not to an alarm, but to the sensation of cold steel slicing into his skull. A Japanese saber, swung with lethal intent, carves a groove across his scalp. The blow is meant to cleave his head in two. It misses by a fraction of an inch. Stunned, bleeding, and disoriented, McKinney opens his eyes to a nightmare. He is alone. His machine gun outpost has been overrun, and pouring out of the jungle mist are 100 battle-hardened Japanese soldiers, intent on slaughtering every American in Company A. What happens over the next 36 minutes is not just a battle. It is a statistical impossibility. It is a story of one man, one rifle, and a level of primal survival instinct that transcends military training. This is the story of how a Georgia squirrel hunter stood his ground against an entire infantry company. This is the story of the Dingalan Bay stand. To understand the ferocity of the attack that morning, we must first understand the desperate state of the war in the Pacific in the spring of 1945. By May, the Empire of Japan was dying. The United States had retaken the Philippines. Manila had fallen in a bloodbath of urban warfare. The Japanese Imperial Army, once the conquerors of Asia, had been pushed into the mountains and the jungles. They were cut off from supply lines, starving, disease-ridden, and desperate. But a desperate enemy is often the most dangerous. On Luzon, the Japanese forces had fragmented. They were no longer fighting for victory. They were fighting for honor, for the emperor, and to take as many Americans with them as possible. They adopted new tactics. Gone were the massive bonsai charges across open fields that could be mowed down by artillery. In their place came the Kirikomi infiltration attacks. These were stealth assaults. Small to medium-sized units, moving like ghosts through the dense foliage, striking at command posts, artillery batteries, and isolated perimeters under the cover of darkness. They used swords, bayonets, and grenades. They sought to bleed the Americans, to terrify them, to turn the jungle into a slaughterhouse where superior American firepower meant nothing. The 123rd Infantry Regiment of the 33rd Infantry Division was tasked with rooting out these holdouts. It was miserable, grinding work. Patrols through leech-infested swamps. Ambushes in tall grass. Company A had established a perimeter at Dingalan Bay, a strategic point on the coast. They dug in. They set up machine gun nests. They waited. But the Japanese were watching. From the tree line, scouts had observed the American positions. They identified the strong points. They mapped the watch rotations. They knew that at 5:45 a.m., the night shift would be exhausted, eyes heavy, waiting for the sun. They gathered a force of roughly 100 men. An overwhelming number against a single section of the perimeter. Their plan was simple: punch a hole in the line, overrun the machine guns, and then roll up the American flank from the inside. It was a solid tactical plan. They just didn't account for the man sleeping next to the machine gun. John R. McKinney was not born a soldier. He was born a provider. Growing up in the rural poverty of Georgia during the Depression, ammunition was a luxury. You didn't waste a bullet on a target you couldn't hit. You didn't take shots that might miss. His father taught him a unique style of shooting. "Don't look at the sights," he would say. "Look at the target. Feel the rifle." It was a technique known as instinctive shooting. It required a profound connection between the shooter and the weapon. McKinney learned to track squirrels darting through the high pines, small, erratic targets moving at speed. He learned to shoot wild turkeys that would vanish into the brush in the blink of an eye. He learned to reload without looking. He learned to move silently through dry leaves. He learned that in the woods, stillness was your armor, and speed was your weapon. When he was drafted, the Army tried to teach him their way. They taught him sight pictures, breathing control, steady positions. McKinney learned it, but he kept his old habits. He knew that in a real fight, targets didn't stand still like paper silhouettes on a range. He was assigned the M1 Garand, the greatest battle implement ever devised, according to General George Patton. A semi-automatic, gas-operated rifle chambered in .30-06. It held 8 rounds in an en-bloc clip. It was heavy, rugged, and hit like a hammer. To most soldiers, the Garand was a tool. To McKinney, it became an extension of his body. He knew the weight of it, the balance point, the exact amount of pressure needed to break the trigger. On the morning of May 11th, that rifle was resting across his chest as he slept. It was the only friend he had within reach. 5:47 a.m. The attack does not begin with a shout or a gunshot. It begins with silence. A Japanese officer, armed with a traditional gunto sword, had crawled on his belly through the mud for an hour. He had bypassed the trip flares. He had moved under the noses of the sentries. He stood over the sleeping McKinney. He raised the sword with both hands, preparing for a downward stroke that would decapitate the American. Perhaps he slipped. Perhaps McKinney shifted in his sleep. The blade came down. Instead of severing the neck, it glanced off the side of McKinney's head. The steel bit into the scalp, slicing the ear and carving a bloody furrow across the skull. The pain was blinding. A sudden, white-hot explosion in the brain. Most men would have gone into shock. Most men would have curled up and died. McKinney's eyes snapped open. Adrenaline flooded his system, overriding the pain. He didn't think. He didn't assess. He reacted with the primal instinct of a cornered animal. His hands found the wood of the Garand stock. He rolled. The Japanese officer was raising the sword for a second, finishing strike. McKinney didn't have time to aim. He didn't even have time to bring the barrel up. He swung the rifle like a baseball bat. Crack. The solid walnut stock of the Garand smashed into the officer's jaw. Bone shattered. The man crumpled backward, the sword falling from his grip. McKinney scrambled to his feet, blood pouring down his face, blinding his left eye. A second Japanese soldier lunged from the shadows to his left, bayonet fixed. McKinney spun. The rifle came up. Instinct took over. No sights. Just the target. Bang. The .30-06 round hit the attacker in the chest at point-blank range, lifting him off his feet and throwing him back into the jungle. The shot shattered the morning silence. And then, the jungle erupted. Banzai! The element of surprise was gone, but the momentum was still with the enemy. The Japanese plan hinged on capturing the machine gun emplacement. It was a heavy weapon position, manned by McKinney and 2 other soldiers. The other 2 Americans were stunned. One was wounded in the initial volley of grenades that followed the shout. The third man, panicking, grabbed his wounded comrade and dragged him back towards the secondary line, 40 yards to the rear. "Get back! They're overrun!" someone screamed. McKinney didn't go back. He looked at the machine gun pit. 10 Japanese soldiers were rushing it. A dedicated assault squad. 3 laid down suppressing fire while 7 others sprinted for the gun. They reached it. They jumped into the sandbagged pit, swarming over the American weapon, turning it around. If they got that machine gun operational, they would mow down the entire company from the flank. McKinney didn't retreat. He charged. He leaped into the machine gun pit, right into the middle of 10 enemy soldiers. It was madness. 1 man against 10 in a space the size of a large dining table. The fighting was instant and savage. The M1 Garand is a long weapon, difficult to maneuver in tight quarters. But McKinney handled it like a pistol. He fired from the hip. Bang! The first soldier, trying to load the machine gun, fell dead. He spun. Bang! Bang! 2 more dropped. The bolt locked back. The clip ejected with a ping. Empty. There was no time to reload. 3 Japanese soldiers turned on him, bayonets flashing. McKinney reversed the rifle. He grabbed the barrel, ignoring the heat of the steel. The heavy wooden stock became a bludgeon. He swung it overhead. The butt plate, steel-shod, crashed into the skull of the nearest attacker. The man went down. Another lunged. McKinney parried the bayonet with a rifle body, stepped inside the guard, and drove the stock into the man's throat. The last man in the pit hesitated. That hesitation was fatal. McKinney smashed him into the dirt. The pit was a charnel house. Bodies were piled on top of each other. The feed mechanism of the machine gun was smashed in the struggle, rendering it useless to the enemy. But McKinney couldn't stay there. Grenades were starting to fall. He scrambled out of the blood-slicked pit, clutching his empty rifle, and rolled behind a fallen dipterocarp tree 20 yards away. He had killed 10 men in less than 90 seconds. But the army was still coming. The fallen tree was massive, 4 feet of solid tropical hardwood. It was the only thing between McKinney and eternity. He huddled behind it, wiping blood from his eyes. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump. He reached for his belt. He grabbed a fresh N-block clip. 8 rounds of ball ammunition. He jammed it into the receiver. He slammed the bolt forward. He was ready. From the jungle, the Japanese commanders were confused. The machine gun should have been firing by now. They should have broken the line. Instead, there was silence from the pit. They reorganized. A wave of 15 infantrymen emerged from the tree line, moving in a skirmish line. They weren't charging blindly. They were moving tactically, bounding from cover to cover. McKinney took a breath. He rested the rifle on the log. This was his world now. The world of the hunter. Distance, 40 yards. Target moving left to right. He didn't close one eye. He kept both open, tracking the movement. He didn't align the iron sights perfectly. He just pointed. Bang! The lead soldier dropped. The others froze, looking for the muzzle flash. Bang! A second man spun and fell. The Japanese realized they were facing a marksman. They hit the dirt. "Grenades!" someone shouted in Japanese. Type 97 grenades began to rain down around the log. Boom, boom, boom. Dirt and shrapnel sprayed the air. The concussions rattled McKinney's teeth. But the log held. He knew he couldn't stay in one spot. A stationary sniper is a dead sniper. McKinney began to move. He crawled along the length of the log, popping up at different intervals. He would appear on the left. Bang. Drop. Crawl 10 yards right. Pop up. Bang. Drop. To the Japanese, it seemed like there were 5 or 6 Americans behind that log. They couldn't pin him down. But McKinney was running dry. His belt pouches were light. He had fired 3 clips. He had maybe 20 rounds left. He looked back toward the rear. There was a supply dump about 30 yards away, a pile of crates hidden under a tarp. Ammo. He had to get there. To get to the ammo, he had to cross open ground. The Japanese had brought up support weapons. Knee mortars, Type 89 grenade dischargers. They were deadly accurate. Thump. Whistle. Boom. The first shell landed near the log. They were bracketing him. McKinney sprinted. He ran in a zigzag pattern, diving into a shallow depression just as a mortar shell vaporized his previous position. He reached the rocks near the supply dump. He ripped open a crate. Bandoliers. Cloth pouches filled with preloaded clips. He grabbed 2 bandoliers, slinging them over his shoulders like Pancho Villa. 120 rounds. A lifeline. But as he turned to fight, he saw a new threat. The Japanese tactics were shifting. They realized they couldn't advance directly. They began to flank. A group of 8 soldiers was moving through the tall grass to his right, trying to get behind him. If they turned the flank, they would have a clear shot at the company command post. McKinney was the only thing standing in their way. He moved to a new position, a termite mound, 5 feet tall and hard as concrete. It offered a commanding view of the flank. He waited. He let them get close. 60 yards. 50 yards. The lead soldier stepped out from behind a palm tree. McKinney fired. The man fell. The others broke cover, charging. This was the test of the M1 Garand. The ability to put rapid, accurate fire downrange without working a bolt action. Bang, 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 bang. McKinney was a machine. He wasn't panicking. He was working. Acquire target. Squeeze. Recoil. Acquire next target. 5 of the 8 men fell in the grass. The remaining 3 broke and ran back into the jungle. He had stopped the flank. The sun was beginning to rise now. The gray light of dawn revealed the carnage. Bodies lay scattered across the clearing. The smell of blood and cordite was overpowering. McKinney was exhausted. The cut on his head was throbbing. His shoulder was bruised purple from the recoil of nearly 100 rounds. But the Japanese weren't done. They launched one final, desperate push. 3 soldiers, screaming, sprinted directly at the termite mound. They had abandoned tactics. This was a suicide run. One of them carried a grenade. He was 15 yards away. He pulled the pin. McKinney had 1 round in the chamber. He leveled the rifle. The soldier wound up to throw. Bang! The bullet hit the soldier square in the chest. He fell backward. The grenade dropped from his hand. Boom! The explosion tore the Japanese squad apart. Silence fell over Dingalan Bay. Minutes passed. The jungle birds began to sing again, a surreal contrast to the death below. From the rear, McKinney heard voices. American voices. McKinney! Hey, you alive up there? It was the reinforcement squad. 8 men, creeping forward, expecting to find everyone dead. They found John McKinney leaning against the termite mound, reloading his rifle. He was covered in mud and blood. His uniform was torn. He looked like he had crawled out of hell. "I'm all right," McKinney said softly. His voice was hoarse. The squad leader looked out at the field. He stopped. He stared. "My God," he whispered. At 7 a.m., with the sun fully up, a patrol went out to count the dead. The official report reads like fiction. Around the machine gun pit, 10 bodies. Some shot, some bludgeoned with blunt force trauma. In front of the fallen log, 15 bodies. Scattered in the grass and on the flank, another 13. Near the mortar position, 2 bodies. 38 confirmed kills found immediately. 2 more found later in the jungle. A total of 40 enemy soldiers. But the true number was likely higher. The patrol found blood trails leading back into the mountains, evidence of wounded men dragged away by their comrades. Company A had lost 3 men killed and 7 wounded. Without McKinney, the casualty count would have been in the dozens, perhaps the hundreds. The Japanese would have rolled up the line. They would have massacred the sleeping troops in the rear. One man, a 130-pound farm boy, had broken an entire infantry company. Part 9. The Reluctant Hero. Narrator. The Army promoted him to sergeant. They wrote up the citation for the Medal of Honor. But McKinney didn't want it. He didn't talk about the battle. He didn't brag in the mess hall. He simply went back to duty. When the war ended, he was summoned to the White House. President Harry S. Truman, a man who had seen combat himself, stood before the slight Georgian. Truman placed the blue ribbon around McKinney's neck. He shook his hand. "What do you plan to do now, son?" Truman asked. McKinney looked at the president. "I reckon I'll go home, sir. Do a little farming. Maybe some hunting." Truman smiled. "America needs men like you." And that is exactly what he did. McKinney returned to Screven County. He never married. He lived in a small house. He farmed. He fished in the Savannah River. He disappeared. For 50 years, he lived a quiet life. His neighbors knew he was a veteran, but few knew he was a legend. He avoided parades. He threw away letters from authors and historians. When people asked him about that morning in May 1945, he would shrug. "I just did what I had to do," he would say. "I wanted to live." It wasn't until 1995, 2 years before his death, that a group of veterans tracked him down. They told him that his actions were still taught at Fort Benning, that infantry officers studied his use of cover and fire, that he was a case study in the ultimate soldier. McKinney seemed surprised. To him, it wasn't a tactical masterclass. It was just a squirrel hunt where the squirrels shot back. John R. McKinney died in 1997. He was buried with full military honors. Before the casket was lowered, a soldier placed an M1 Garand rifle on top of it, a symbol of the tool that saved 190 lives. The story of John McKinney is more than just a war story. It is a testament to the human spirit. It challenges the idea that battles are won by generals on maps. Sometimes, history turns on the actions of a single individual. One person, in the right place, at the wrong time, who refuses to yield. On that dark morning in Luzon, 100 soldiers came for John McKinney. They brought swords, machine guns, mortars, and grenades. They brought the fury of an empire. And John McKinney stopped them all. He proved that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about waking up with your head cut open, seeing the enemy swarming your position, and deciding to stand up and fight. It's about holding the line, not for glory, not for a medal, but for the men sleeping behind you. John McKinney was a hunter. And on May 11, 1945, he became the ultimate prey that bit back.